Hello, in this video I want to talk a little bit about the changes that are happening in the real estate industry. Specifically, for this video I want to focus on how the changes affect home buyers. So you may or may not be aware that there was a lawsuit started in Missouri, and as a result of this lawsuit, the National Association of Realtors ultimately decided to settle. And as part of that settlement agreement, there are some things that are changing in the real estate industry. And they're pretty significant changes in a lot of ways, and in some ways they're not so significant. Let me talk a little bit about it to try to help clear up confusion that's out there. So the biggest thing that happened with this settlement agreement is that offers of compensation from a seller or a listing agent to a buyer's agent will no longer be listed in the MLS. Okay, so previously, if I was helping a home buyer and they identified a home they wanted to see, I could pull up that home and I could see what the selling agent was offering the buyer's agent by way of compensation. I think there was a fear that some agents might not show a house because the compensation offered was too low. I know I never actually looked at the compensation until I was writing up the contract, and I just dealt with whatever was being given. So instead, what will happen is buyer's agents will have to call the listing agent to find out if there is any compensation being offered, and if so, how much is being offered. So that's the first piece of what's changing. The second piece, and this is probably the piece that may impact home buyers more, is that buyers, before they can see a house with a realtor, have to sign a buyer's brokerage agreement with an agent. So in a lot of ways what's happening is the way we're treating buyers is going to be similar to the way we treat sellers. So when I go to meet with a seller, and because they've identified they want to sell their home, after we talk through how I market a home, how homes get sold, what the market's doing, strengths and weaknesses of the home, condition of the home, upgrades, and all of that, we start talking about the listing process. And if the seller decides they want me to list the home for them, they sign what's called a listing agreement. And that gives me the right to sell their home. And in exchange, they promise to pay compensation to me for the services of selling their home. So that has always been in place. I think the lawsuit came about because some sellers felt like they had to pay the buyer's agent compensation. That has always been negotiable, but perhaps was not always presented very clearly. So these changes are an effort to try to make sure that sellers know that they are not required to pay a buyer's agent compensation. So now buyers have to sign a similar agreement when they're working with an agent. So if you have homes that you want to go see, you're in the market to purchase a home, and let's say you contact an agent on Zillow or Realtor.com, or maybe you found me on my website through an ad and you contact me, before I can show you any homes, I have to have a buyer's agreement signed by you. If I don't have it signed by you, then I am subject to a fine. The first fine is $250. I think the second fine is $2,500, and fines can be up to $15,000 for showing homes without a buyer's brokerage agreement. So essentially what it is doing is ensuring to sellers that they may or may not choose to pay a buyer's agent, because you have signed an agreement with a buyer's agent that you will compensate them at closing. It's once you find a home. You're not paying anybody if you don't find a home. But if I work hard for you and I help you find a home, then essentially you're agreeing that if the seller or the seller's agent isn't paying my compensation, that you will. So, the bad news is it could be an extra expense you have at closing. However, there are lots of different ways that I could be compensated. So, obviously the last scenario for most buyers would be coming out of pocket for it at closing. But it could be negotiated. It could be that the seller's already set aside that they're going to pay a buyer's agent commission, and I think a lot of sellers will. It could be that the listing agent negotiated a high enough compensation that they're going to split it with the seller's consent with a buyer's agent, in which case you're not going to have to worry about it as a buyer. And if neither of those two things are in place, it could be built into your offer as well. So just like we negotiate concessions, so if you want money for down payment assistance or closing cost assistance from the seller, then that is something that can be negotiated as part of the contract, just like we negotiate price and inspection period, so on and so forth. And so this would be something you could negotiate. But then the last option is if none of that can happen, the seller is just adamant they're not going to pay, then you're agreeing essentially to pay that compensation, your agent, at closing. And part of it is that nobody should be working for free. And, honestly, there's a lot of situations where I've shown agents or shown clients homes only to find that they were working with another agent, and so I essentially was working for free. The fact of the matter is all agents work for free until there's a closing. But this will tie you to a buyer's agent a little bit more strongly because there's a contractual agreement in place. Now, it sounds like that's all bad news, but the reality is there's actually a lot of good news that comes with it, because when you sign on with an agent to represent you, and this is representing your interests, there are certain things that agent now has a responsibility to you for. One of those is dealing honestly and fairly, and a lot of people would do that without a contract, but there's some that wouldn't. So this single agent contract essentially promises that they have to deal with you honestly and fairly. They have to be loyal to you. They have a responsibility for confidentiality. So if you share with them, you actually can spend $500,000 for this $475,000 home. They can't share that with anyone without your permission. They have a duty of obedience to you. So they have to do what you say, as long as it's, of course, within the confines of the law. You can't ask them to do something illegal. But as long as it's legal, their job is to do what you tell them as essentially your employee for purposes of that transaction. They have a duty of full disclosure, so if they learn something from the seller, they need to share that with you. Accounting for all funds, they have to make sure that you're aware of where all the funds are going and how that's all working. They have to exercise skill, care, and diligence in the transaction. And essentially, what they have to do is really, truly represent your interests. So how is this different than if I have a listing and you contact me directly and you say you want to save on not having to pay a buyer's agent any kind of compensation? So you decide, well, I'm going to find the home myself and I'm going to contact the listing agent. I'm just going to work with them and I'll get a break. What you have to remember is the listing agent has a duty of loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, so on and so forth to the seller. Their job is to get the seller the best terms for the offer, right? So their job is to get the seller the most money, do the fewest number of repairs, have the shortest inspection period. If they can negotiate no appraisal, their job is essentially to get the seller the best deal possible. So if you're working with the seller, the listing agent, as a buyer, and you're not represented, you have no one but yourself to represent your interests. And so you're going to be competing essentially with a listing agent that maybe has done a couple hundred real estate transactions. They're going to know everything there is to do in every way possible to net the seller the most money and the best terms. So by signing a buyer's brokerage agreement, you will ensure that you have someone on your side trying to get you the home for the least amount of money, the most repairs, a full appraisal contingency, and anything else that you need to make the deal the best it can be for you. Okay? And so without that, you are potentially negotiating at a significant disadvantage with a listing agent. So again, to summarize what's happening is there's no offers of compensation listed in the MLS. It can be listed on brokerage websites, things like that, but not on the MLS anymore. And buyers are required to sign a buyer's brokerage agreement with a real estate agent if they want representation in order to see houses. So again, I cannot escort you into a home and show you a home if I don't have a buyer's brokerage agreement signed with you. And that's the case for every agent. And as of August 17th, that's going to be every realtor in the country. In Florida, we've already implemented it here, and that's gone into effect as of August 6th. Please reach out to me if you have questions. This can be new and scary, but it really doesn't have to be. I'd love to answer any questions you have. You can post them below here on the channel. You can contact me directly. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Please reach out, and I hope you have a great day.